You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, man, I'm sure this next week's going to go like really, really slow, thinking that football's back. And it's always hard. Like the first few days of training camp are just them wearing helmets and going through a couple drills. It's not crazy. Let's get on pads day one and knock the tar out of each other. But man, I just can't wait till the 17th and hearing Broncos are back in the building and ready to go.
Yeah, football doesn't feel like it's back yet. It's not, but it doesn't feel like it's that close yet either. I think it's probably because it's been so damn hot, and being in a college town, football doesn't really truly feel like it's back until college football kicks off, which I feel like is about 56 days away. So it'll be here soon, but training camp will get us to that. And when football really starts to, the games matter then. So excited for that. And I'm already starting to prep for the trash talk between Cam and myself when it comes to the Hawkeyes versus the Huskers.
Are you taking the over under on the Huskers winning more than 8 games?
Man, I'll probably go under. I feel like the Big Ten West is pretty tough top to bottom, and while the Huskers do have a more favorable schedule this season, I still feel like they're a couple seasons away. And it just makes me nervous to have a team that so much is reliant on one player, especially a team that uses that player to run as far as the quarterback goes.
Right.
So if he goes down, that's the difference of probably 5 games, right? Like, it'd be a massive swing in how good the Huskers can be. But they have some really good recruiting classes coming in, so I feel like they're probably a year or two away. But, Minnesota's looking pretty good this year. Wisconsin's been Wisconsin. Northwestern just keeps winning somehow. And Purdue is really on the up and up. So the West is really freaking open in the Big Ten. I think the only team in the West that doesn't stand a fighter's chance is Illinois. But even then, I think they've improved as well. So it's a wide open division. And while they don't have the top teams like you see in the Big Ten East with Michigan and Ohio State and somewhat Penn State. Penn State's good, but I would take Wisconsin over Penn State. And Penn State's had a lot of issues with people decommitting and transferring. So I'm not sure what's going on there. But I would say that the Big Ten West, top to bottom, is much better than the East. Because, the likes of Rutgers and Indiana and Maryland have really sullied the rest of that division. So Big Ten West is going to be quite the competition this year, and I'm all for it. Unfortunately, the Hawkeyes have an extremely difficult schedule. Almost every single one of their road games they could lose. Every single one, I wouldn't be surprised if they are not favored in. Iowa State's going to be really good this year. Unfortunately, hate to say that, but they're probably the best defense in their history, and maybe the best defense in the Big 12. That 3-3-5, man, it's coming to the NFL soon, I think. You have the 4-2-5s and the 3-3-5s, and I think we're going to see that change here in the league because obviously the college is where the innovation happens, and that's what you're seeing to combat the air raid. Well, if the air raid is successful in the NFL, look for the 3-3-5 to start making its way in the NFL. We're already seeing it with the Patriots, actually. And then you got the Broncos. The Hawkeyes also play on the road at Michigan, at Wisconsin, at Nebraska, and at there's one more tough one too. Oh, at Northwestern, which for some reason the Hawkeyes just continually lose to. So it's a tough schedule this year for the Hawks. And when you have a lot of guys leave early in a program that relies on developing players rather than recruiting at a high level, it's gonna be difficult. So sorry, I've talked 2 minutes now about a team on a Bronco college team on a Bronco podcast. Well, but man, I'm excited for college football to get here, and obviously any football, but obviously living in Iowa City, stoked for it.
Right. Well, any Big Ten fans out there, make sure you're following Nick at Nick Kendell MHH because he'll have plenty to say about the Big Ten. You can also find me on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. If you enjoy our show, make sure you head on over and leave us a 5-star rating at iTunes, where Building the Broncos along with Huddle Up are found under the Huddle Up podcast. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, you said it in our last podcast that Zach and Chad kind of took over the camp battles discussion, and they got to, if you haven't heard it yet, go make sure you check out their top 10 camp battles that are going to be going on. And so for us, I thought we'd maybe take it to a different level when we're looking at camp and just maybe some things we're looking forward to of just figuring out about this team, because there's so much new. You got a completely new coaching staff. You got a new quarterback. You got some really young pieces on the offense. Defensively, adding quite a few players to that secondary. So there's just a lot of new. And I thought it'd be a good chance for us just to talk a little bit about that and some big questions we have about this team beyond just the camp battles of what they're bringing this upcoming season. And so I'll start off with my first one. And we've already talked about this a little bit on our show, but I think this is one of the biggest ones of this offseason. What will this Rich Scangarello offensive system really look like? What can he do here at the NFL level? Because he's never been an OC in the NFL. He's done it a little bit in college. He was the OC for Carleton in 2001, co-offensive coordinator for UC Davis in 2008, offensive coordinator for Millsaps in 2010 through 2011, offense coordinator for Northern Arizona in 2012 to 2014, and finally the offense coordinator for Wagner in 2016. Now, I will say that his last couple jobs there with Wagner, he had a lot of success. They ended up second in their division in scoring, 29.7 points per game. Wouldn't that be amazing if the Broncos could score that many points per game?
Oh my God, man! How many games would they have won over the past few seasons if they could have done that?
It'd be astronomical. We'd be Super Bowl contenders every year. I mean, obviously, with the defense that they've had, that many points, and letting Von Miller get after the quarterback every single game because they're in it, just crazy. But they were second in passing, and I love this stat. They were second in giveaways for the season. They only gave up 7 the entire year. So it designs an offense that can really protect the football. Then at Northern Arizona, they had the 27th ranked offense in all of college football, which, I mean, when you're thinking the NFL and there's 32 teams, you're going 27th. But college football, how many teams are there in Division I?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah,
and that's a non-Power 5 team.
Right. But 27th, that's still a pretty good number. They averaged 31.6 points per game. Yes, the competition wasn't as good, but still 31.6 points per game. Again, Bronco fans, I mean, I think we'd take about anything over 24 points per game right now. At least
that'd be amazing.
Right.
At least they're protecting the ball too.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, he's had some success when he's been the play caller, but this is a whole new arena. and so it's just going to be interesting how he schemes for the talent that he has. And I mean, he's got some young talented players when you're thinking about Cortland Sutton. I mean, you think about it, he had over 700 yards, 750 yards last year. For being a part-time starter, that's pretty darn good. You got Phillip Lindsay, who was Pro Bowl running back. Got Freeman, who had some decent runs last year before he got hurt. You got Emmanuel Sanders, who hopefully will be back from injury. You got Noah Fant. You got some other tight ends that could bring something to the table. And so, I mean, offensively, you're kind of looking at that and saying he could really do some good things with what they have. But it's still, I got to see it on the field. I just don't know what he's going to really bring to the table.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much this whole team right now. I've said it all offseason. It's just 10,000 questions, right? Like just so many things that have to play out that we just don't have an answer to. A lot of new ingredients that we don't know how they're going to mix. So it's why, people projecting the Broncos to pick in the top 5 in the draft. It's like, I get it. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? People projecting the Broncos to go to the playoffs. Even well, I guess that could happen. They have a lot more, I would say, going against them in that regard, just because the division is tough at the top, and the schedule is hard. But again, who knows? And that really goes with the offense as well. I mean, what really changes things? Blocking scheme changing, going to more to a zone scheme there. And then the play calling changes, the different system, and then quarterback. So it's really the only thing sticking the same is some of these skill position guys. And even then, you got turnover. I mean, is Sanders going to start the season on the PUP? Maybe. That's very possible. I'm just moderately worried, because we're at that time of year where everything is awesome. Everything's great. But when you have a guy like this come into his first offensive coordinator gig with a bunch of new pieces, it's going to take some time. And it's not so much the scheme I actually have questions about with him. It's the play calling, right? And he's been coaches elsewhere, offensive coordinator at Wagner. He's done it. But play calling in the league, I mean, we've criticized people in the past for the scheme, but they've called good games still. So that's something that is just a complete unknown for me that we're not going to know until later. Because as good as the Shanahan's scheme is, Kyle Shanahan that is, he gets a lot of credit for his play calling too, because he knows when to call what and, sets everything up. And that's a totally different type of art than having a really creative scheme. So we'll see. But hopefully he does really good. And as terrible as it sounds, we got to cheer for him to do so good that he's not here anymore, right? Because that means everything went great. But at the same time, though, then you're having to turn over again and new scheme, maybe kind of scary. So we'll see. But I'm cautiously optimistic, but also worried at the same time. I really don't know what to feel. I feel like the emotional roller coaster when it comes to the offense and the play calling with Scangarello. But all right, we're going to take a break here. Obviously, trudging into the summer camp coming up here, training camp, Hall of Fame game, so getting really excited. But we got to tip our cap to the sponsors quick, but we'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
And we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast, answering some training camp questions that we have, as training camp is right around the corner with the Hall of Fame game to boot. And the next big one here, health. It's always that's something that unless you're the Chargers, it seems to be pretty, if you have a really healthy season, you tend to regress to the mean the next year. If you have a really unhealthy season, you tend to regress to the mean. So really no rhyme or reason. Training staff is an important thing. If they're really bad at their job, then obviously that'll make a difference. But for the most part, it's pretty fickle. It's just what happens. So that's a big question this season. But for the Broncos specifically, health is obviously a big question. I'll kick this off to you, Carl.
Well, I mean, you think about the players last year that are now coming off of IR. You got Emmanuel Sanders, Ronald Leary are the two kind of headline guys, big-time starters for the Broncos. Of course, Phillip Lindsay with his hand, I think he'll be okay, but that's still a concern. I'm sure teams will test that. Troy Fumagalli, we've heard good things about him throughout OTAs and everything like that, but it's really when the pads come on that they start testing some of those injuries. Hireman, of course, again, another guy that was showing something, got hurt, had a pretty brutal injury last year. When you really think about it. Chris Harris, I think he'll be okay because broken leg, you can come back from that, but he's still up there in age, so how does he recover? Jake Butt, Bryce Callahan, and Sua Cravens. I mean, all these guys were for other than Callahan, were expected to be pretty big contributors for the Broncos last year, and a couple of them were, but for the most part, I mean, the reason I bring up the health concern, for me at least, is when I look at this Broncos roster, I just don't see the depth to recover from a lot of big injuries.
Especially on the offensive line.
Right. And so a guy like Leary, we need him to be something good, for at least average. If he can be average and stay healthy, that would be really big for this offensive line being much better this year compared to last year. And, of course, Emmanuel Sanders, you've said it before, when he went down with injury, that offense fell apart last year. He was that one really consistent piece beyond Phillip Lindsay that made that offense go. And I like a lot of the young wide receivers, but Sanders is still the top guy. And it really changes what you can do on offense when you don't have him. Phillip Lindsay, I hope he doesn't have a fumbling problem this year. But we're going to have to see how his hand recovers. And then the tight end position, it's one of those, it could be one of the best in the league or it could be nothing this year. They're probably the position that you just can't figure out because we don't know what any of these guys are. Hireman has shown some flashes, but he still has not always been consistent. Troy Fumagalli, hasn't played a snap in the NFL. Jake Butt was showing something in the first couple games last year, but went down with injury. And of course, Noah Fant being added to the group. I mean, he's a dynamic athlete, but is he a great tight end? And so for some of these guys, just being able to stay healthy, stay on the field, Chris Harris, can't lose him in the secondary because I don't think our cornerback group is all that deep. And Sua Cravens, I mean, we'll see if he even makes the roster or not. But again, a lot of these guys are expected to be pretty decent contributors this season. And there's just not much behind them. So the health of the team is just really going to matter this year for success or failure. And you hate to blame success or failure on injuries, but it does play a part.
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. I mean, if Von Miller's out, you're done, right? Like over I know that the Patriots were able to get the playoffs with Matt Castle, but if Tom Brady goes down, you think they're going to the Super Bowl? No. So the timing of the injury matters, who it happens to, severity, just a lot of factors. So one of my favorite sites for football information is Football Outsiders, and they actually have some cool information on injuries as far as how it pertains to the past few seasons. And where do you think the Broncos rank? I'll throw this to you, Carl. Where do you think the Broncos rank in terms of their injuries and how injured they were compared to the rest of the league last year overall?
I guess I'd say middle of the pack.
Yep, the 14th team as far as the 14th healthiest team. Now split on offense and defense, though it changes a little bit. It's kind of funny. The healthiest team in defense last year was the Washington Redskins, but the least healthiest team in offense was also the Washington Redskins. So really, that's crazy to see one side of the ball be so injured. But for the Broncos last year, the offense was pretty injured compared to the rest of the league, 23rd healthiest. But the defense overall was pretty healthy, and I think they came in 11th. So middle of the pack for the Broncos. A lot of people were, blame the injuries last year for this team going down, but in reality, the injuries were, they're middle of the pack. They didn't have way more injuries than anybody else. They didn't have a bout of luck also. Teams like, I'll read the first couple teams here who were extremely lucky with health last year. The Ravens, the Bills, the Bears, the Rams, the Steelers, the Saints, the Browns. Some of those teams, they should expect a little bit of regression as it comes to health and their players staying healthy this season. But then you got teams like the Colts, the Eagles, 49ers, the Jags, and the Bucks who were super injured last year. So expect this to regress to the median, those teams on the edges of the stats. So health is big for the Broncos, but not in a way that they were uber-duper healthy last year or uber-duper unhealthy last year. And that's going to make a big difference in the win or loss because, middle of the pack.
Right. And like I said, for me, the injuries, it more plays into just the depth of this team.
Yeah.
It just, when you've had so many bad drafts in a row before these last two, and we don't even really know what this one from this past or from April really will be for the Broncos. I think it's going to be a good one. But for the most part, before at least 2018, they just didn't draft anybody. And so you're seeing, we have no depth. You did an entire podcast on ranking the Broncos draft classes, and really that 2017, 2016, 2015, you're looking at those classes and saying there's nobody. You got a couple players and that's about it. And so for the Broncos, you got some other teams that have depth where guy goes down, next guy comes in, really brings probably 95% of what the starter brought. Well, Chris Harris goes down. That next guy, not even close to what Chris Harris brings to the table.
No.
Emmanuel Sanders goes down. Again, you got those young guys, but and we don't know what they are exactly, but they're not Sanders when he's healthy. And Phillip Lindsay, there's not another running back on our team like Phillip Lindsay. So there's definitely a bigger drop-off when you're looking at what the Broncos will have for that second part of the roster.
Yeah, and depth matters a crap ton. So we'll find out soon about the depth. The schemes and the game plans are not totally obvious in preseason, but you can kind of get flashes and get an idea of the depth of the team. So we should have a better idea soon, but hopefully, God, knock on wood, nobody gets severely injured in training camp and preseason. Who was the player that already got injured? We lost somebody. It was an offensive lineman. low level, but I can't put my finger on it. I should know that. It was an offensive lineman for sure. It was like Austin Schlottman. So for some reason, that sticks out to me. Producers on it.
Nico Fala.
That's it. Fala. Yes, that's it. So that's too bad. Some people were hoping for him this season. But yeah, no, health will be big. So we'll see. But moving on now, players in the new scheme, obviously a big question. And you have a list here, so I'm going to run down it here. I'll play a little host for a second. I'll ask you what your thoughts on how these guys fit with the schemes and the guys around them. And starting off with the first round pick, Noah Fant.
I do think he's going to be a bigger part of the offense than some people think.
Yeah.
I think that Scangarello was a big part of why they went after him. And, the Broncos said that they talked to him before and said, you need to go to the right team. I don't think he's a fit with every team, but I do think he's a good fit with what the Broncos want to do with their tight end. And so while I don't expect him to go have 1,000-yard season in his first year, I do see maybe that 500-600-yard season, 6 to 8 touchdowns. And we've already kind of talked about this of expectations for the rookie class and what they can bring to the table. But I do think he's a very good fit. We talked about it before of the West Coast system compared to the Shanahan system that many people call a West Coast system. But the Shanahan system wants to push the ball down the field. They're not throwing it within that 5-yard mark a lot. They'll throw it there, but it's just not compared to a lot of other West Coast offenses. And so for Noah Fant, he is that one guy that can really push the defense to have to respect his speed, respect everything athletically, what he brings to the table, and can beat him over the top when he's going against safeties and linebackers and the such. But I am interested just to see, you got this brand new toy. What are you going to do with them? But I don't know. I just think they're going to have a lot of plays schemed up to get him open, just like what you saw with George Kittle there with the 49ers. They did such a good job of scheming him open. The Bronco fans, I hate to bring up the 49er game last year, but George Kittle killed the Broncos, destroyed them.
I think he just caught another pass against him.
I think so. He's still running. And so they did such a good job of really understanding what the defense was trying to do for the Broncos, which, most teams knew what the Broncos were trying to do. And just making sure to have those kind of crossers going on, get him open, get him in space, and let him go make some plays. And for Noah Fant, I think they're going to do a lot of the same things of really working a lot of plays where he is the main guy that they're looking at to get the ball to.
Yeah, we'll see. For Fant, for me, the big thing is how much can he be integrated in the offense as far as the entirety of it. Like we saw with Kyle Shanahan and everything, they use a fair amount of fullback packages, but the 11 personnel with the 3 wide receiver sets, is Fant going to be the tight end one out there? Or is he going to be more a specialty kind of weapon where he's more that flex tight end, playing some slot, moving around a little bit? Because if he can be that one tight end where he's out there most of the time, he could have a really special season, but I'm not sure how much of a specialty player he's going to be this year. Is he going to be more of that obvious passing downs guy and then red zone? So we'll see. Obviously, Flacco loves the tight ends. Rick Scangarello was freaking doing jumping jacks and cartwheels after they drafted him, but we'll see. Typically, first-year tight ends, it takes a bit. But a lot of starting experience at a program that demands a lot from the tight ends in a scheme that loves that tight end. So we'll see. We'll see with the Fant. I'm excited for him, but a little bit too risk for me to hope too much on him year one, just because the tight end position. Moving on now, another question, Lindsey versus Freeman. And I'll kick this one off first. I think Lindsey's going to have another really good year this year. He might not exactly replicate last year, but I think that Freeman is the guy that actually is the one that he's not going to be better than Lindsey, don't get me wrong, but I think Freeman, people are sleeping on him, and I think he's going to get more touches and be more valuable than people think.
Well, you look back at his Oregon days, and the blocking scheme that they used, it's probably going to be a lot more similar to what the Broncos are going to use this year compared to last year. And so I just think that this fits him well. And he is a guy that last year we saw it when he was healthy. He showed such flashes of having that patience to wait for the hole to open. And when it opened, he hit it. And he stuck that foot in the ground and just got upfield. Lindsey, this is my one worry, and I know some Bronco fans are not going to be happy to hear this, but last year there were so many times where, and this is partly because of scheme, but I mean, he hit that hole full speed. There was no slowing down for him. He was just going to beat everybody to the hole and not give players a chance to get lined up, anything like that. And then there's times he was even beating his blockers to the spot, which because of his speed, that didn't really matter as much. But in this scheme, in this blocking setup, there's going to be times where they're going to say, Lindsey, you need to show a little bit more patience and wait for that hole to open and then use that speed, just go boom. And I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying last year that's not what he was called to do. So can he have a little bit more patience this year when he's called to run? How are they going to use him? I think is a big question, because I think a lot of people are expecting a little bit more of him being involved in the passing game compared to being the main runner. I mean, there's a big question going on of who's going to get more carries this year, Lindsey or Freeman. And I mean, when you have a talent like Lindsey, you use him. But is he going to be more used in different ways to make sure that he has opportunities to best take advantage of his skill set and the athleticism, the speed, and the quickness that he has of getting him to the edge with the pass game and using that as a way to really get him one-on-one with a guy and let him go make plays. I don't know. It's just going to be, for me, interesting how they view both of these running backs.
I think ideally you see Freeman with more carries, but Lindsey with more touches, if that makes sense. Obviously,
it does.
The pass game.
I mean, you're hoping he has that 40 to 50 catch kind of season.
Yeah, those are the guys. I mean, the Kamaros, the Bells, the Gurleys, the Barkley. I mean, the elite running backs these days. Outside of Zeke, who's okay as a receiver, but outside of Zeke, those elite running backs, it's their complete game in the pass game. I know I've been harping on it this offseason, but that's important. So we'll see. Wide receiver core, this one's going to be interesting because they didn't really get the speed threat. You know, I don't know if you saw the that 40-yard dash competition, but 49ers Marquise Goodwin ended up winning it. And that dude can fly, and that's always been a huge component of Kyle Shanahan's offense, having a guy who's just freaking blazes. He might not be the best route runner, might not be the best getting off press, might not have the best hands, but with true speed, and not just necessarily vertical speed. I mean, he uses those guys jet sweeps, pre-snap motions, out routes, crossing routes, etc. It's not just flying down the field. However, you have that too when you have that kind of speed. So that's something that I don't think they have in the wide receiver core. Other than that, I mean, I'm excited about Cortland Sutton as an X. I'm excited about Sanders when he eventually does come in. Deshaun Hamilton as that Z/slot, and maybe Juwan Winfrey steps up this year. But the wide receiver position, the wide receiver core does feel like it's without Sanders, it's still a player away. And with Sanders on the move, probably after the season, it's something that might need to be addressed early in the draft.
Right. And there's going to be some, we've already talked about it before, that there's going to be some wide receivers to look at in this next draft that have that speed component that you're talking about, of just being able to make teams have to game plan for how you're going to stop it. Like you said, it's not just about going deep, but it's about all those extra plays you get to add. And even if you only run it once every 3 or 4 games, teams still have to plan for it. And right now the Broncos are going to be a little bit more limited in what they can do because they're missing that weapon. But I mean, it's still an interesting group just because they got some young core players for that wide receiver group, and some guys that really could take that next step. I mean, Cortland Sutton, his ceiling is off the charts. I mean, I think most people know that have listened to this show for a while. I was not the biggest Cortland Sutton fan coming out. But just what he showed last year, where he wasn't even at times all that great. I mean, he had a lot of drops compared to the number of opportunities he had, but yet he still went out there and made a lot of big plays. I mean, if you watched his season last year, most people probably wouldn't be saying that was a 750-yard season, but yet it was. And so – again, what can he do when he's maybe a little bit more comfortable being in the NFL, is a full-time starter now, what can he do now to really take that next step? It'll be just I'm excited to see that, and to have a better quarterback that helps too.
Yeah, hopefully that'll help a lot. But we'll see. Pass rushers obviously is going to be interesting. I'm not worried about the edge guys. Von Miller and Bradley Chubb are scheme transcendent talents. But the interior guys, I mean, we talked about on the last podcast, they don't exactly fit what we've seen from Fangio with Wolf, Gotsis, and Harris. So that with all three set to hit free agency after this year, might just be kind of a treading water year, getting those guys in spots where they're comfortable and whatnot before we really start to see the defense change into what Fangio and Donatella want to do as far as a blueprint.
Right. And then, I mean, we talked about on the last podcast of the cornerbacks and the safeties, how they're going to use them, and just having some very versatile players to really work with. I think that they can really do some great things to confuse some quarterbacks. I'm excited to see what they can do against Mahomes.
Yeah.
That'll be fun to see. I do worry a little bit the way that the Chiefs in the past have tried to beat this more zone-heavy scheme that the Broncos are going to be running this year has run a lot of verticals, and they got the players to run a lot of verticals. And so, I mean, our safeties are really going to have to be on top of their game to make sure that they don't get beat over the top when we're playing the Chiefs. And especially with Mahomes' ability to escape pressure, you got to cover a little bit longer. So it'll be tough, but I'm excited to see what Fangio can do to really slow down the young phenom. Did you see on what late night show it was?
I think it was Kimmel. Yes,
was
I did
Kimmel?
see it.
Okay.
Absolutely disgusting. I'm not a fan. Gross.
The champ stamp. Oh my goodness.
That's not for me. I don't think I could ever do that. I'm like, I wouldn't even bet any of my friends like in a, what is it? If you get last place in the fantasy league, you have to get the nasty ass tattoo. Hard pass, guys.
Yes.
That is dumb. You got to live with that. Let's not do that. Let's move on though. Cornerbacks, talked about it. Obviously, those guys, not exactly Mukamara and Fuller, but you did have Callahan. It's much more versatile than we saw in the past with the Bears, and also the safeties. I mean, Simmons, excited about him. Very versatile player. Parks, versatile. Kareem Jackson, super versatile. So that back seven, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It's probably one of the things I'm most interested in watching this preseason. Unfortunately, last I remember, the coach's tape on the NFL Game Pass doesn't come up until week one. So we won't get the game tape when breaking down tape for the preseason games, but still excited to see how these rotations are working and how these personnel groups look. So I think we should probably keep moving here, Carl. We're getting long. We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I'm Nick along with Carl. And final question, what's your biggest excitement heading into camp? And also, what is the thing you are dreading the most now that the season is finally here?
Well, I mean, for me, the biggest excitement probably would have been the same whether we had this new coaching staff or not, but just Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, being in Bradley Chubb's second year, and especially now that they are in the Vic Fangio system, that I think can really take advantage of what these guys bring to the table, and just teams having to figure out how to stop both. Because I do think the Fangio system does a great job of finding a way to get one of them one-on-one. And either of these guys one-on-one, I'll take them every day and twice on Sunday. And so just I really am. I think that they're set up to have a really big year. If the offense can give them any kind of leads to play with, at least half the games this year, that they can really be at least in the game, I think we're looking at possibly that I guess that mark of elite edge duos is that 30 sack mark. And if they can get there, man, I'm excited to see what that's going to bring to the table. The thing I'm dreading the most, I mean, I guess I'm going the most obvious ones here, so I'm taking them away from you here. But the offensive line,
yeah,
it's just even with Mike Munchak in the building. And I know you sent that article to me earlier today of PFF has the Broncos offensive line ranked 12th in the NFL. And if they can get there, oh man, I do think that they could become a playoff contender with the 12th ranked offensive line.
Yeah,
I don't think they're that good.
No,
just being honest. Mike Munchak, he can do a lot of magic, but you still have to have talent. And right now, I mean, Garrett Bowles, he's going to have to take a big leap. You got, obviously, Reisner, the rookie next to him. I hope for big things, but you just don't know with rookies. And, of course, McGovern at center. He was pretty decent at guard. Center was not good for him.
No, really bad at center.
And I've heard so far in OTAs, he's really struggled with snapping the football.
That seems important for centers.
Yeah, just a little bit. So it makes me a little bit nervous that's how you ruin a drive. When a quarterback has to either jump up or dive down to get the football, it just throws off the timing of the play, just really ruins things.
Yeah.
And, of course, Leary, what kind of health is he going to have? Juwan James, new player. I mean, he's probably that one player you're kind of going, okay, hopefully if he can stay healthy, he'll be consistent for you. But so it's just a group that you're going, they have pretty good potential, but they also have the ability to be a bottom 5 offensive line this year.
Yeah, I think Munchak will keep them from being that bad, but 12th overall, probably more middle of the pack. I would have said like 16 to 18.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, a lot of health questions is the big thing.
So same question to you then. Biggest excitement, thing that has you very, very worried for the season or dreading it?
Gosh, mine are 2 in the same. It's got to be quarterback play. Did they improve at quarterback? Case Keenum was supposed to come in and stabilize the ship. Well, he did anything but. Better than Trevor Siemian, no doubt, but still straight ass, not good. And now we got Joe Flacco coming in. He was having a really good season last year until he got injured, and then obviously they had the first-round quarterback, so they're ready to move on from him. But Joe Flacco hasn't played great over the past few seasons. Is that entirely his fault? No, but he definitely deserves, I would say, a huge portion of the blame, maybe majority of the blame. I mean, he's a dwindling older player that never really lived up to the second contract that he got. But still, getting a quarterback, if he can prove to be at least solid, then that's going to be big for this team. He can't be dreadful, but that's both my biggest excitement and my biggest fear is just the quarterback position. And that extends to Drew Lock as well. I mean, are they going to get him in before he's ready? I mean, they're going to start Kevin Hogan in the Hall of Fame game. What does that mean? So I don't know. We'll see. But really, I mean, it takes a team to win a game, but quarterback has been the thing that has just been driving me nuts over the past few seasons and got me both excited and nervous at the same time.
We really got spoiled with Peyton Manning.
Oh, yeah. Peyton Manning and John Elway.
Right. When you have MVP quarterback on your roster, it makes everything so easy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you drop off to Simeon. and nothing against Simeon. I mean, he just was thrown into a really bad situation.
More like dive off.
Right. And then, of course, Paxton Lynch busting didn't help things. It has. It's been such a – you've gone from one end of the spectrum, from MVP to bottom 3 quarterback in the NFL kind of thing. And that's just – that's such a huge drop-off. It's hard to see.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliated 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you all enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.